be a sponge, and then bring the juice.
By focusing on your improvement, by focusing on your progress, and eliminating any fixed mindset that you may have and acts of perfectionism, then you encourage your own mastery.
On some level, we do what we want to do 24 hours a day. Now, sometimes it may not seem like that, but if I'm choosing to work instead of sleep, what I'm actually saying is keeping my job is more important than sleeping.
I'm tired of this. I'm tired of getting beat. What can I do to get over this hump? So mentally, that's when I kind of put that forefront, like, hey, it's either all or nothing.
I like to put failure in quotations because I don't believe that failure is true failure if you're looking at it with the right mindset.
The truth is, the journey to greatness is hard. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes focus, and every day you have to decide what you value, what you want to pursue, and what you want to achieve. And if you dig deep enough, if you push hard enough, we all have what it takes to be great. Welcome to the Edge of Greatness. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Edge of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Charles Schultz, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Isaac Wilkins, strength training professional, performance and lifestyle coach, and host of the Spiral of Leaders podcast. Isaac, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. I've been following you on LinkedIn a lot. I love what you're putting out there. What I first want to start with, though, is I saw you recently said that you listen to a lot of Hans Zimmer. As a guy who enjoys a good film score and has a playlist on Pandora for film scores, ironically enough, I've got my Hans Zimmer sitting next to me.
Nice.
What score gets you fired up the most?
Really lately I've been doing the new Dune score. That's been really, really good. I find that there's a lot of the ones from Last of the Mohicans that kind of comes up a lot on my playlist. And of course, Gladiator's the big one. Everybody listens to Gladiator.
Oh, of course.
But lately it's been Dune that's been playing on repeat.
I like that. I'll have to check a little bit of that one. I don't know if that's popped up yet on mine, so that's good. Let's start here. I saw that you had an outdoor streak of workouts. I want to say last I saw it was 3 years. Is it more now?
It is. It's still going.
Okay.
March 7th is the date. So I'd have to do the math to figure out where I'm at now. But
okay.
Last I looked, it was almost 1,300 straight days.
Wow. Awesome.
So now it's probably a little bit over that.
Tell me a little bit about that journey. What started it, and what have you learned about yourself during that time?
Yeah, so we could get into a pretty deep rabbit hole on that one. So basically, I had reached a point where, as a business owner and as a person, as a man, whatever you want to call it, I kind of had reached a pretty down point in my life. Right. So I'd kind of gotten to where I was still burnt out from my business, and kind of had been running myself ragged, doing the trainer lifestyle, so to speak, where up at 3:45 and, if you own the gym, you don't get to leave before 8 or 9 at night, and kind of like burning the candle at both ends, and kind of reached the point of barely working out myself anymore, too much self-medication with alcohol and everything else that goes with that. And I realized that, somebody who had identified as being very strong and very fit for most of my life, that had all gone away from me. I had a couple big injuries, and I think that kind of started the spiral, so to speak. And I had like this 2 or 3 year depression, for lack of another term. I always am a little careful throwing that particular word around because it has clinical connotations. But, so I finally was like, okay, well, I got to do something. And every time I'd try to start training again, I would make the same mistake that I would tell my clients not to do, and I'd immediately try to go right back to powerlifting or something like that. And that would go good for about 2 weeks, and I'd get hurt. And so I was like, well, let's deconstruct this. I literally build people's habits for a living. So what's the easiest thing I can do that gets me moving in the right direction? So I started going for a walk, which as a 20-year fitness pro was kind of a painful pride step back on the ego, so to speak. But so I didn't originally set out to turn it into this like big streak. I just started, look, just every day, just go do something. And let's do it outside because the weather was starting to get nice and it kept me out of the gym where, the gym had started to get like kind of painful for me and ugly. So it got me out of that. And it just kind of started building from there. And before you know it, I had like 30 days and then kind of 60 days. And somewhere along there, I started talking to clients about it. And so my clients were all giving me like, positive encouragement, and they were starting to recognize it. So they'd start to say things like, where's the streak at? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I really hadn't been thinking of it as a streak. But so eventually it got to the point where I was like, okay, well, this is actually helping other people and helping me. And it's showing that the habit's kind of growing, and I'm learning lessons on building habits and learning lessons on struggling with habits. So it just kind of kept going. And now it's like, wherever it's at now. But I wouldn't say it's like one of those things where like people are like, were you going to do it forever? I'm like, I don't know, but no reason to quit.
Yeah.
So, so it's been really instructive for me on kind of building that habit and teaching people how to build habits as well as helping myself build habits. And overall, my health is better. My mood is better. It's led to more mountain climbing and hiking and doing stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting point too. And a lot of times I think people think they have to do this grandiose thing to make a change, right? They have to do like this big display that I'm all in, I'm ready to go. When the power of our compact pound effect, which is the daily walk, has huge impact. You mentioned your mood has changed. Do you spend your time when you're walking with like headphones, or do you just think, or how does that work for you?
It depends.
Okay.
So now I kind of have like a handful of different options I do. So where it may be a daily walk, or it may be, now it's more often a ruck. I've kind of sort of structured it a little bit more as I've done some Go Ruck events and things like that. So I kind of have like a really low key, like check the box if I'm in rush, or, I live in Maine. So sometimes in February being out there sucks. So you know what I mean? So like there's like the really low key. In that case, I usually don't do any headphones. I just kind of just be in the moment. Other times, if it's more of like a training ruck where I'm like going to be out there for like 2 hours, then it's like, okay, well, I'll bring a podcast or I'll do something like that. But yeah, probably 50% of the time I don't have any sort of input, and I just kind of let myself think. And then other times I maybe have podcasts, rarely music. I usually, if I'm going to do it, it's usually a podcast or something like that.
Okay. So you mentioned that this was a good learning opportunity for you to understand how you build habits, how habits are worked and created. What's one of the big takeaways you got from doing this streak and being outside that you've learned about habit creation?
Two things. One is that there's always going to be, especially for the outside aspect of it, there's going to be times where you don't want to do it, and you're always going to feel better after you check that box, right? So that's always a big thing. And the other one is that momentum is more important than the gross amount on any one workout, or whatever you want to call it. But any one habit event, whatever it is you're trying to do, doing something to keep the momentum going is going to be way better than killing yourself one day and then skipping 2 days after that.
That makes sense. So how do you help people who are struggling with the motivation side of it? Because it's not always easy to get started. It's not always easy to feel like you want to do it. What were some of the tools that you used on the days where you're like, man, it's raining, I don't really want to be outside today, or it's cold, or how do you talk yourself into doing those things?
So one, I don't want to, and this works for me, this isn't necessarily going to work for everybody, but I don't want to like have one of my people ask me, how's the streak going, and be like, oh yeah, well, it was raining one day, so I didn't do it. So there's that, like, extrinsic accountability that I don't know, maybe that's intrinsic because I don't think anybody that I know is going to like give me any shit for it. But so that's definitely been a big part of it. But the other thing is to just boil it down to what is the absolute simplest thing that you can do. Because what happens is with the brain is that we have a tendency to, our brain looks at everything from a caloric expenditure, so to speak. What's your benefit versus what am I going to spend? And so if your brain is going to think that, well, this is really, really hard and it's going to cost me a whole bunch of energy and I'm not going to get a lot of benefit from that, you're better off finding a way to ratchet down either the expense, which would make it easier, or find a way to up your reward. And so those are kind of variables that I play with a lot. So in my case, I usually, if it's a day where it's just not going to be a good day for it, then I ratchet down the expenditure. I make it as easy as possible and just get it done. And then the next day I come back, I have more energy or I have more time or I have more whatever the cost is. And so the next day that I can go after it and I can get more.
So when you say dial down the expenditure, so like on that day, maybe do like a 15-minute walk instead of a hour and a half. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So so I have a little loop that's kind of my small loop, so to speak, in this neighborhood, and I have that set up so that I can get it done effectively no matter what. And my brain is confident of that. My brain recognizes the surroundings. I don't have to drive anywhere. So every little brain excuse is gone. I basically have to put my shoes on and step out my front door and get moving. Versus if I had to go drive somewhere and if I had to do this and then I didn't put gas in the truck and I didn't so on and so forth. All the little tricks that the brain will play. I have built a system to eliminate those as much as possible.
Yeah, no, I love that. I've used that with my clients before where I was like, I don't even care if you work out, just step foot in the gym every day. I don't care if you actually get on a machine. I don't care if you actually do any work, but you have to walk through the door. And if you have something to do that day, you can walk right back out. But you have to go check in, scan your card if you're at an actual gym, or come say hi to me if you're at my gym. And it's amazing how often once you actually do that first step, you find a little bit more.
Yeah, it would be, I have not used that, but it would be rare for a client, I would assume, to make it all the way to the gym, make it all the way into the door, make it all the way into saying hello to you, and then say, okay, bye, I'm going to leave. Now, they may do that once or twice if they truly are jammed up. You know what I mean? But they're not going to do that 4 days in a row or 5 days in a row. They're going to get a workout in there somewhere. They're going to be like, well, I can warm up.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you warm up. And by the time they're done warming up and I don't know how you run your facility, but if they have other people in their group and stuff like that, and they start chatting around, and before you know it, they're into the first exercise and they almost didn't realize it, and they leave with a big smile on their face.
Right.
After a workout.
Right.
Yeah, it's just a matter of getting some of that motion happening.
So, as somebody who's been working on understanding habits and studying habits, what's a habit you still struggle with today that you'd like to eliminate, but it's a challenge for you?
Mm-hmm. So, I still struggle with some procrastination. I still struggle with, which I don't know if you quite call that a habit, but it's in that realm. And I still struggle with way too much phone time. That's something that I find that if I'm not careful, I'll do the scroll for 20, 30 minutes. And I'll maybe tell myself that I'm going to, pop on to LinkedIn or pop on to whatever and just leave a couple comments and check the box and do that. Next thing I know, it's 20 minutes later.
Yeah.
So I've kind of built some structures to limit that, and I'm having some success, but definitely not quite where I'd like to be with it.
So what are some of those structures? I'm curious.
Yeah. So what I've found is I don't touch my phone for the first couple hours after I get up. I guess I touch it. I have it in my pocket and stuff, but I don't log on to any social media or anything like that for the first couple hours. So that lets me start to get some real work in and start to get my day off on a good foot versus, kind of getting the poison of social media and all the BS that's going on there. So that's a big thing. The other thing is when I've been much more intentional lately about structured work blocks and saying like, hey, for the next hour and a half, I'm going to be working and have it built into my schedule. And so whatever that is I'm working on, the phone goes into a drawer and I don't see it. And so if I don't see it, then it doesn't tend to pull me nearly as much.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I find that similar. Like if I can put the phone on the other side of the room or in a box or on the other, not leave it in a different room completely, I don't have the desire to want to scroll on. But if it's just sitting next to me or in my pocket, I get that like phantom buzz, like, oh, somebody must go up. And then like, oh wait, no, nobody wants me. What am I doing? Why am I even looking at this?
Yeah, if I can see it, like if it's like sitting next to me, then I'll pick it up, and it'll be in my hand almost before I realize it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I have that same problem for sure. On the procrastination side of things, though, I'm curious about that a little bit because as productive as I try to be, I'm wondering how much of our procrastination is just wired in to the human body and to the human experience and to who we are as human beings. Is there a way to fully eliminate procrastination?
I've not found it, if there is. But if I do, then I'm going to do a book on it and I'm going to get super, super wealthy.
For sure.
I think that there is some of that. And I think it all eventually, again, ties back to the brain as far as any sort of confusion, any sort of overwhelm. The brain will immediately try to like seek comfort. And we always like nobody procrastinates on doing things they don't want to do. Like you don't procrastinate by filling out your yearly reports. You know what I mean? So, or whatever it is that you dislike doing, you always procrastinate doing things that you either like to do or that are relatively mindless. So the brain doesn't view that as a threatening behavior. But if you're, overwhelmed, which is an issue that I have in that I tend to be of kind of the visionary type, so to speak. And so I tend to always have ideas like all the time, like things I want to work on. I could do this. I could go down this rabbit hole. I could learn about this. I could study this. I could do that. Mm-hmm. And that's in many ways that's good, but it makes it hard for me to implement because I tend to then have 1,000 ideas swirling in my brain, and my brain goes, stop with all that. Yeah. And so versus like doing any one of those things, it then says, okay, well let's go find something new to rabbit hole on.
Okay, that makes sense. I feel like I'm in a similar boat with that because I'm always thinking of new ideas. I'm always having these random thoughts on what would be a cool book idea or post or a new video or whatever it may be. What's a system that you've kind of implemented to help you organize those? Is there something you do that helps you kind of say, okay, these ones are good for let's explore this now, and then this is something we can save later, or is that something you're still trying to figure out yourself as well?
No, I mean, I'm always trying to figure it out. But what I find is the most effective is doing a weekly brain dump, which is an exercise that I do in just a few steps. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's pretty common. But basically what I do is I just take a period of time, and I teach this to all my clients, and this is super helpful for them. And at first, I do it when I'm teaching people to do it, I tell them to do it, to schedule an hour block. Now it doesn't take as long. But take 50 minutes and just when quiet time, you get a notebook, you get a place where, you can put some Zimmer on, but a place where you're not like going to be distracted, and just write down every single thing that comes to mind. Everything comes to mind. And you'll find that for like 20 minutes or so, it'll be like a flurry of writing. And then there'll be this kind of like lull. And then all of a sudden you get one or two things and that'll kick off another flurry. And eventually you end up with this huge list of stuff that's been swirling around in your brain. Everything from your mother's birthday to XYZ to this thing you need to do. Oh, you're going to talk to this coach, you're going to talk to that client. You got a trip coming up 3 months from now. All this stuff, you get it down. And then you can kind of chop it up into 4 lists. So the first list is things you absolutely need to do like within the next week or two. So that's my do list. Then there's the list of things that are just not going to get done or don't matter. And that's dump that out. Delegate is anything that you can kind of pass off onto somebody else. Be this pass it off to an employee or, hey, I could get my girlfriend to go pick up this at the grocery store or whatever, just something that, you can dump off to somebody else somehow. And then delay is the last one. That's the things that oh, I've got a trip coming up next March. Got to buy plane tickets. Well, do you need to buy plane tickets the next 2 weeks? Probably not. So put that on your calendar, do whatever it is you got to do, but get it out of your head. And so get all this stuff out of your head. Now you're stuck with this list of things that are actually things you need to do in the next week or 2 weeks or whatever it is. And it's still usually a big list, but it's usually much smaller. So within that, you can start to prioritize that, and you can start to break those up into whatever chunks you need to break them up into, so that you can say, okay, well, I know that I need to get this done by Friday, and I need to do these 3 things. Cool. I'm going to do this one tomorrow. I'm going to do this one the next day, and I'm going to do this one on Friday. And get that stuff kind of out of your head and swirling around, because it's all chewing up bandwidth. It's like a computer's RAM is filled up. It's kind of the same idea. So the more you can get that cleared out. And then I find that, over time, you do this a few times, maybe once a week or something. I like to do it on Sunday nights. Then you end up, it doesn't take as long because you've got a lot of that stuff cleared out. So maybe it doesn't take you an hour. Maybe you can do a quick brain dump in 20 minutes and say, okay, what do I need to focus on this week? So you start to over time train yourself a little bit more. So that's kind of the system I use to help start to get that stuff put into a manageable list.
I love that. And I think that's a valuable thing, because anybody who's creating stuff, anybody who's doing work where their mind is constantly getting information, like you said, over time, we just become foggy and it all kind of blends together, and it just turns into this soup of wait, was that for this or was that for that? And I don't even know. And we just don't have that same sharpness. So I like that idea of getting it on paper, getting it out, and then organizing it. And then you forget about some things, and then now you have your priorities set. And I think that creates a whole lot more productivity for sure. I want to dive into a little bit. Tell me about living life like a spiral.
Yeah. So, I view things in a spiral. So what I mean by that is basically you've got your way you live your life. You could go one of 3 ways, right? And you could basically be a dot, which means you just kind of stay wherever you are and nothing really happens. And, there's people that are perfectly happy that way, and that's awesome for them. But I don't think that people that listen to podcasts like this tend to be of that mindset. So we'll not really stress on that too much. And then there's a lot of times where people, they end up living their life in a circle. And so they kind of just end up in the same place over and over again. They're sort of like an enlarged dot. They are moving and they feel like they're kind of moving in a direction, but they keep finding the same things happening, and they never kind of escape whatever that radius of circle is in their life. And however you want to phrase that, or however you want to apply that, be it fitness, be it, their business, be it their family, whatever it is, they kind of just end up in the same stuff over and over again. And then there's people that live in a spiral, which is what I like to kind of promote. Because as much as we'd like everything to be a line between A and B, we all know that doesn't work. Life has seasonality. Everything we do, we're cyclical beings that are kind of trying to live a linear lifestyle. As far as our, we wish things were in a straight line, but that doesn't work that way. So you got to accept that there is some of that up and down and that circular type of movement. But as long as the circle is getting bigger all the time in a spiral, then you're going to continue to do more and bigger things. So it's your trajectory, basically.
I love that. So what would you coach somebody on if they find that they're starting in a spiral, but then all of a sudden they start to feel themselves end up in a circle, and they end up
stuck
back
in that circle?
They get stuck in the circle. They expand for a little while, they're doing really well, but then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, I've been here before. Oh, what's going on? How do you coach them out of that?
Mm-hmm. So that, a lot of times, you got to think, well, if something was in a spiral trajectory and then it became a circle, that means that it hit some sort of a wall or gravitational force somewhere. And now if you were going to look at it from a cosmic perspective, for lack of the terms, you could have it be either there's something in the middle there that's pulling them back, gravitational pull back, or there's some sort of wall they're brushing up against and they're not going to get through that. So that starts to allow us to really look and pinpoint at what that might be. You know, if they find themselves continually making some sort of progress and then they peel off, you know, you're a baseball guy, so it's the idea of somebody that tries to slow down before they get to first base. You know, you need to be able to run your way right through that. And if there's a reason why they're slowing down, pulling up, then that's something we need to figure it out. Or if there's something that for whatever reason they can't seem to get past. Now that may not be my universe. That may end up being like a therapy situation. Who knows? But if there's something that doesn't allow them to keep moving forward, then they got to get rid of that anchor somehow.
Okay. That makes sense. So it's more about identifying what's really stopping them at that point, why it's continuing to cycle in that circle instead of just progressing like it had been.
Yeah, and I mean, for the vast majority of people, you know, the thing is that people look at problems in this like big sense of problem, capital P, and they don't start to like tease apart what it is that's actually going on. So a lot of times, if you start to slice it up a little bit, you can say, oh, well, this is going well, this is going well, you know, oh, this is not going well. Okay, well, maybe that's where we need to start looking. You know, like if your business is struggling, but then you say, okay, well, my product fulfillment is great, my customer reviews are great, my team is great. What's our problem? Oh, we're not getting any new leads in the business. Okay, well, your business isn't struggling. That's the end result, but that's not the problem to fix. The problem to fix is you're not getting leads in your business. Okay, well, now we can work on that directly. And who knows what that answer may be, but now we have somewhere to look as opposed to just saying like, oh, we're struggling.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I like that. And I think that's a big part of becoming a good problem solver is being able to tease apart what's really happening and find that area of focus that you can then attack and move forward. So
yeah, because chances are it's very rare that when somebody's got some sort of a struggle or problem, it's very rare that every little thing is going wrong.
Right.
Like, and if every single thing was broken somehow, some way, I would say you got to go back to some serious drawing boards. If you found yourself in a very bad place, if that's happening. So chances are there's actually only one or two things that are holding you back, and you just got to identify what those are so you can work on them.
So can you tell us a story about a time when you found yourself stuck in the circle and what you did to break free?
Yeah. So, one of the big things that I found when I was building my facility was that I got to the point where I was doing really well with my clients. I was doing really well with getting new people in, but I was burnt out, and I had too many clients. I was a one-man show at that point. The time I'm thinking of, and I was always like very, very hesitant to bring on new coaches, even though I knew that's what I needed to do. But I was much younger then. I was much more egocentric in the sense of like nobody's going to be as good as I am and stuff like that. Which at that point was true. Like no new coach I was going to bring in was going to be as good as I was. That's the way it goes. But what I finally ended up doing is I realized that, okay, well, if I boiled it down to the 2 or 3 things that I needed the most help with, then I could bring somebody on. I could teach them to run that at a very acceptable level. So we started out with a couple of interns. And once I got them up to speed, they coached the warm-ups, they coached the soft tissue work, and they coached stuff like that. And I felt comfortable once, I had trained them up, but I felt comfortable with them doing that. And then it's like, oh, well, now I don't have to coach warm-ups. So now I have all this time to work with more clients, which was good. And then I got to the point where I realized that, oh, well, I could get them to start coaching, and I could, and it took time longer than it should have for me to get to that point. But again, I nailed down what I could fix and started working on that. And then, of course, it eventually grew and had a team it got to the point where I really didn't need to be there if I didn't want to be there, and they still did a great job. So,
yeah, no, and that makes sense. And like you said, it didn't happen overnight. It was a small incremental change that you can then apply over time. And I think that makes the big difference for making those shifts and being successful in them. So something I want to change here. It's something I see a lot of is that people fear change, this fear of change. And the first time we talked, you mentioned that you stepped away from your business and you started down this new path of exploring the mind and doing something like that. And that's a big change. And that's something that not many people would pull the trigger on. So how did you overcome this fear of change that I think we all deal with and we all have in us, and make that move to selling the training business and pursuing this new path?
So, a couple of things. In effect, I created a forcing function. So, in my particular case, the lease was coming up on my facility, and I kind of wanted to make this step for a couple of years. And had kind of been playing like both feet or a foot on each side, so to speak. And so I said, well, okay, well, I have this, decision point in the road here where I can either sign another lease or I can pursue what I want to pursue. And that, I didn't want to sign the other lease or another lease. So that sort of like pushed me to it. And then once I was in it, I took about 6 weeks off after that because I had not had a vacation in like 15 years. But so I did take some time to reconfigure and kind of get my head straight. But that was a pretty major life change. But I think the big thing for me was creating some sort of a forcing function where it was like, okay, well, I've got to do this. And that's got to be the change I made. And so I've always operated better that way for big changes. I'm just the type of person that's like, I'm probably not going to do all the little things along the way until the test is due, so to speak, until the project's due, which I'm getting better at. Again, that whole intentional work block thing, stuff like that. But for a lot of people, if they want to make a major change in their life, I find it does happen. The start of it happens with a big event. Like you'll see clients who they get a divorce, and so they, recommit to their fitness, or they get the word from their doctor, or, you'll have an athlete that played at a pretty good level all through high school, and then they signed at a D1 school, and now they realize, oh, it's serious. I got to step up.
Yeah.
So that one event is often a big thing. I like to get people before they have a one catastrophic event, if possible. And then the next thing is find an environment that promotes the new thing that you're doing. So like in my case, I started hanging out and talking with more coaches that were doing the mindset work that I was doing or that I wanted to do. Yeah. So for me, that was valuable because it was people that I could see what they were doing, and I could see, maybe how I might do it differently, but it just created that environment. And so you'd see that. I used to see with my athletes a lot is that when they joined my facility, they went from being the one star at their school to now everybody in there is some sort of a star. And we're all, we're not doing like some high school weight programs are fantastic, but a lot of them are screw off sessions. And so that environment's gone, and now they're into an environment where everybody's training hard. And so they're just by virtue of that, everybody started training harder. And so change becomes easier if you surround yourself with people that are moving in the direction you want to move in.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think I could go down the high school training programs or screw off sessions for probably an hour with you, but we'll keep it more to the mindset stuff today.
I say could throw some rocks there, but
yeah. So
yeah.
What was it about the mind that drew you to it?
Eventually, I just realized that it's the chain of events, right? There's a chain of change. I saw so many people that would do a fitness program or whatever. You could do a business program or whatever, but in my case, it was mostly fitness. And they would do the program. They'd sign up for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever your program is. And they would do the program. They'd show up for the workouts. They'd, eat the foods. They'd lose the fat. They'd get in whatever shape they're getting in. And then by the end of it, the results were awesome, right? The programs were good. But then you see that person 6 weeks later, 3 months later, and they're right back to where they were at the start. And I realized that it's because they never changed who they were. They just relied on physiology to make the adjustments. And so until people started, and then I saw other people that should have done very well in programs and then failed because they wouldn't show up, they wouldn't do the stuff they're supposed to do, they wouldn't do whatever. And that always bothered me, for a lot of reasons, but always bothered me because it felt like wasted potential. And so I started digging into like, well, okay, well, why are these people either A, not doing what they're supposed to do, not doing what they said they were going to do, or why can't they keep it going after they finished? And that's what it just all led back to. Doing the mind stuff, the neuro stuff, the habit building led back to all that. And I was like, okay, well, if I get these things right, then the fitness stuff or the business clients I have, the business stuff, that almost happens just by virtue of existence, because they become the person that does these things, versus the other way around was a little bit more of a crapshoot. Like if I got somebody in great shape in, let's say, 12 weeks, then a certain percentage of those people would change and they would develop the mindsets they needed to develop to stay in great shape, but it was a small percentage. Versus if I could get them and get their mind right, it was a much larger percentage that could stick with it. And the fitness became so much easier. So it led me to believe that the mind was the first thing to focus on.
No, I love the mind stuff. I think that, in my opinion, I think the difference between the good and the great is their mind and how they approach the world. You said something interesting in there about when they achieve their goals, keeping it. And I think that's a really interesting thing for me, because how do we teach sustainability in our growth and our success? Because a lot of times I agree, we get these people who they hit a milestone marker and then they go, okay, I made it. And then they fall off and they stop. And there's this lack of sustaining the success they've had, whether it's in business or in school or in fitness or in life or whatever. We have this up and down pattern, and we don't just have the up and then plateau and then up again. We actually see that regression. So what are some things that you've learned to help kind of maybe stave off some of that downward part of the spiral once you've reached a milestone marker?
Yeah, so the first thing I like to do is I like to start with smaller chunks, if at all possible. Because what you need to do is you need to get them to start to assimilate these things into their lifestyle, as opposed to them being like an event. Okay. Right? Like if they're looking at every single workout, like just to keep with the fitness realm, but if they're looking at every single workout like an event, oh, I've got 12 weeks, I'm going to do 3 workouts a week. So every single one of these 36 workouts, check the box, check the box, check the box. Then chances are when they're done, they're going to start missing some check boxes, right? And to some degree, it happens with everybody almost. But the key is to like get them to where that just becomes part of their life, and they're not counting the workouts anymore. They just work out. So starting with smaller things they can assimilate that move them in that direction ends up being huge, because it's less of a shock to their system, and they stop viewing it as like some sort of a big event they've got to give themselves up for. Okay. That's huge. The other thing is like they've got to find, in order for it to be a long-term solution, they've got to find something that they actually like. So, like we used, like in the gym, we used what I called a dose protocol. And I definitely didn't come up with that. I'm trying to remember who I stole it from. But basically, like from a hormonal perspective or a neurotransmitter perspective, that means that every workout, we need to make sure they got a dopamine hit. So they got some sort of a positive, bump from that. They got some sort of a serotonin. They had to feel good. They got some sort of a oxytocin, which is a little bit, weird in the gym. We didn't do a lot of like touching and hugging and, love language type stuff. But we always started and ended our workouts with a knuckle bump. And that was enough so that people would walk in the door and they would walk across the gym with their fist up like this to me. It was kind of funny. So that was kind of a thing that we always did. And then have some sort of an endorphin thing, which exercise in the gym makes that very easy to do. So we always started like playing with the brain chemistry on every single workout. So they got to where they really enjoyed it and looked forward to it. And that made it so that eventually they stopped becoming somebody that just was counting workouts and they just did it. Because for them, it was a very pleasurable thing. So you've got to have, if you want to stick with something, it's got to be something that you kind of enjoy, you know. Very few of us do a habit that we absolutely hate.
Right.
You know, there's got to be some sort of payoff for the brain relatively early to set that in.
That makes sense. Because like you said, we don't do things that we don't enjoy. Like we may not like the habit that we're doing, but we do it because there's a reward at the end of it.
There was something like
it's satisfying.
Yeah. Like, I mean, even, you know, a negative habit like smoking.
Right.
Like, you know, very few smokers really enjoy smoking cigarettes. Like the act of smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
But the brain loves nicotine.
Yes.
You know, and the brain and smoking is, you know, and there's very few people that start smoking by going down to the store, buying a pack of cigarettes, going back to their apartment and smoking cigarettes. Like that doesn't happen. I'm sure it's happened at least once, but that doesn't generally happen. What happens is they've got a bunch of friends hanging around and they smoke, and then everybody's like laughing and talking and having a good time. And so that's, you know, they get that sort of little bump from their brain. And so over time, eventually, they just keep smoking out of habit and nicotine addiction. But initially, the brain got a lot of benefits from it. So that's kind of where they stick.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So by taking this journey into studying the mind, what's something that you've learned about yourself that's interesting?
A lot of things and nothing. It's always there's always a bigger rabbit hole to dig down.
Yeah.
But you know, like the biggest thing that I learned was that there's power to change almost anything about yourself. And in the fitness realm, I learned that because I was like the little fat chubby kid in school, right? And I played sports, but I really wasn't that good at them because I was a little chubby kid. But then when I got to college, I started lifting. And in the realm of lifting, I'm pretty gifted. So the second I touched weights, I started getting bigger, stronger, faster. And all of a sudden, all the sports that I wasn't good at, I became good at. So for me, that was a early understanding of, and I wish I had somebody like me when I was 15 as opposed to later on. But it was an early understanding that, oh, I can change things. But I didn't really get that into my brain until later in life. And then I realized that, oh, the same principles that I apply to the weight room, I can apply to my own brain. I can apply to my own habits, and I can do things I never had thought that I was the type of person that would be able to do. So that was like probably the biggest thing. It's just the plasticity of it all.
Yeah. No, and I honestly think that's what I love about sports and the weightlifting and the training part of what I do is seeing people realize how much they can change, seeing people realize just what they're capable of, and this realization that if I put in effort to something long enough, I can get really, really good at it. And I think that that's one of the really cool things about being in the fitness world, working with athletes, and being a coach is just seeing that change happen.
Oh, it's incredible when somebody, and whatever the thing that you're doing, but when somebody realizes that they actually have the power to make the changes they want to make, there's no feeling like it, you know, as a coach.
Oh, for sure.
And then you can step back and let them do it. You know?
Yeah. And that's awesome too. When they start to take over and do it themselves, that's an incredible feeling and awesome to see that happen as well. I saw you make a post about a lot of people do goal setting wrong. So I'm curious how do you teach goal setting?
Mm-hmm. So goal setting is kind of a deep topic. I actually just did a whole masterclass thing on it. I call them Chalk Talks. Anyway, yeah. But
I call mine Chalk Talks too. That's hilarious.
Nice, solid. Anything that's related to like coaching and sports, I like to use that vernacular because a lot of my people that resonates with them. But basically, what people do when they do goal setting is there's a few areas where people tend to make mistakes when they are setting goals. The first is that they just make a wish. They're just like, it's so vague and so big, and it's like, I want to be a millionaire. Okay, great. I hope you get there. You know what I mean? But like, it's like, how are we going to do that? So first is to like nail down like what it is, but then people get into kind of SMART goals, which is sort of the acronym that corporate America likes to use. And I think there's some big flaws with that, which you'll notice that a lot of those SMART goals never get hit either.
Yeah.
The big thing is that they don't have a goal that's really germane to them. They do what like Brian Ward calls them light goals and dark goals, and I like this terminology a lot. They create a light goal, which is something that society says will be good. Oh, I want to lose weight, or I want to make that $1 million, or I want to whatever it is, have a family with 2.5 kids. You can pick the half of kid, but the truth is that that goal doesn't really deeply resonate with that person. It just sounded good. So instead, pick something that's something you talk to yourself about at night. That you talk about under the cover of darkness. It doesn't need to be a bad goal, but just like something that really digs you. And a lot of people don't do that, so they don't end up with the motivation to go after their goals because their goals suck. And then the next thing is a lot of goals. People put a time dependence on them, which I think has its place. Like I do like having, quarterly goals, and I like having, hey, if it's something that's very simple, it's like by Friday I need to get this blog post written. Okay, cool, let's do that. But a lot of people, they'll make a goal and they'll put a time effect on it, and it's on things that are out of their control. So as a result, they're always kind of screwed, because what happens is that this person didn't get back to them on time, or this person didn't do this, or there was something, extenuating circumstances or whatever, that made it so they couldn't accomplish that goal that had nothing to do with their effort. It just was a time-based goal. And so now they beat themselves up and they consider themselves a failure, especially if they're kind of a competitive, maybe type A person, something like that really wants to accomplish things. And so when you start failing a lot, again, the brain is going to say, oh, this guy doesn't follow through with his promises. So I'm not going to, now my risk has gone up. So I'm not going to loosen the purse strings on calories and energy because this guy's going to fail me. So if you do that, you end up doing that a bunch of times, the brain will keep making smaller and smaller and smaller goals so you hit them. And then eventually you find yourself in a little box or a little circle, relative to our previous discussion, of these little tiny goals that, yeah, you keep hitting them, but they don't get you anywhere because they're the only ones that your brain trusts you to actually do. So if you start to go the other way, you start to take off some of the time limits, maybe give yourself some directions and guidelines, but take off the time limits a little bit and start to say, okay, well, my objective is to accomplish this thing, and I can do this by doing these things that I have control of that will lead me to be in the best position to do whatever. Like, for example, if you get a promotion at work, well, that's probably not entirely up to you. You could hit all your KPIs, you could do all the things you want to do, but if upper management decides to do a hiring freeze, you're screwed. But if your goal was to, okay, well, I need this KPI, now you can hit that. And that sets you in the best position to get that promotion at work. So a lot of times people they set their goals, but they're not quite under their control, and that sets them up for failure.
No, I love that. And I think, I start to think about my coaching and my athletes, and they're like, oh, I want to win. But you can't control winning. Like you said, there's certain things about the game that you won't have control over. You can control your preparation for the game, but you can't control the game. And I think that's a big part of like the goal setting piece is if you set goals that are out of your control, that are requiring some external force to happen. Like, again, if you say you want to be a millionaire and you're in sales, you need people to buy. If nobody buys, it doesn't matter how good you are at what you do, you still won't be a millionaire.
Yeah.
And I love that idea that we have to find those controllables within there. I think that's a valuable part of goal setting that a lot of people, like you said, they just don't think about.
Yeah, like I had a kid that it really rings bell. I had a discussion with him, and and he was young. He was 16, but so he was like really like, and he was a football player, inside backer, some of the best field vision I've ever seen, but he was a big team guy, and he's like, we want to win a state championship this year. And my goal is a state championship. And I was like, bro, like, I'm not trying to shoot your goal down, but I know what the rest of your team is like. It's not good. The things are not good. Like, do everything you can do to win that state championship. More power to you. But I just know that they were not a state championship caliber team. And they ended up like 3-7 or something like that. But he was all state, had like a phenomenal season, and ended up going to play college ball. Because I was like, anything that you do that you can control will lead towards your team having the potential to win the state championship. But you cannot win the state championship. It's a football team. So he had a great season. He probably accounted for a couple of those wins, to be honest, and kept them close and a couple others through some phenomenal play. But at the end of it, he felt good about his goals because we had reconfigured them. And like I said, he ended up playing college ball out of it. And that's where, again, like a lot of those things, if you rely on things out of your control, you're just setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think that if we can all start to reconfigure our goals to allow ourselves the wins, we're going to be so much better off. So as we wind down, what I want to do is give you an opportunity to connect with my audience and tell them where they can find you if they're looking for ways to set up goals to help them win, or they're just trying to follow what's your journey and see what you're putting out there, because you got some awesome content going out, and I think they can learn a lot. So where can they connect with you, and where do you want to direct them?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, pretty much all of the social medias. Isaac Wilkins, I'm pretty easy to find as far as that goes. There's not a lot of Isaacs running around, so that's a plus. But as far as like any more detail, then my website, isaacwilkins.com, and I also have a 7-day course, Ignite the Spark is what I call it, where it's free and it just kind of takes you through some of these planning systems and some of the stuff like that to kind of get you from feeling like you're in a rut to breaking out of that rut. And that's at isaacwilkins.com/spark.
Awesome. Well, Isaac, man, I had a great time. It was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for taking time to join me today.
Charles, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. This has definitely been fun. And anytime you want to talk, happy to do it.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely have you back on for sure. As always, guys, keep reaching for the stars. Fall flat on your face. Remember, whenever we fall, always get up.
Thank you for joining us today on the Edge of Greatness podcast. If you haven't yet, please take a minute now to subscribe and review our show. Join us again next week as we continue to dig deeper into the key components of greatness. The path to greatness is never linear, so remember to keep pursuing greatness no matter what. Keep stretching your abilities, reach for the stars, and fall flat on your face. But remember, no matter what happens, whenever we fall, always get up. Until next time, I'm Charles Schultz, and this was the Edge of Greatness podcast.